But I'm also happy that there's a guy who is here since the first year, who sometimes tells the people in Toronto or the other places that he is with the European Graduate School. And then they report back to me, Zizek says this. Is that an advantage? Yes, because he is certainly one of our role models here in all his singularity, rebel without a cause, but with a lot of thinking power. Please welcome Slavoj Zizek.
You see, this is maybe the difference between the two of us. You are looking for the man behind the book. I'm looking for the book behind the man. I claim behind every man there is a book. And okay, so since I'm doing in my class every morning a lot of philosophy, I decided this year to do here something a little bit more political, to confront, or at least to focus on a very traumatic topic, which for sure brings trouble upon you, anti-Semitism. I mean, I think I am fully qualified to do it because I have the honor of having been proclaimed, and that's the catch, for the same text, so that you cannot say I'm cheating, I'm showing for the same text. The same text of mine was attacked in Israel, I think in Jerusalem Post, as the worst anti-Semitic propaganda, and was attacked by Al-Ahram Sunday Supplement as disgusting Zionist propaganda. So I'm on the right way, I think. So let me approach it slowly, systematically. One of the definitions of what Jacques Lacan calls real, le réel, is the point of impossibility within a field of reality. Along the same lines, what for Alain Badiou defines a world, and I think this is crucial when you read him, is not primarily the positive qualities, features of a world, but the way its structure, the structure of a world, relates to its inherent point of impossibility. Sometimes the whole world changes, not because there are some new positive qualities, but because the way this world relates to an impossibility changes. Badiou's classical example, of course, is how classical mathematics dismissed the square root of -1 as an irrelevant externality, as nonsense to be ignored. And incidentally, this is one of the not very glorious moment of Karl Marx. Somebody showed to me the page from his so-called mathematical manuscript where he says square of -1, it's pure nonsense, and so on and so on. While modern mathematics, as we all know, makes this impossible, the calculable, marking it with the letter small I, so-called imaginary number, and then we know the story. Mathematics historically splits, remakes itself by creating constants which occupy these impossible places. So let's be clear. What happens is not that the impossible simply becomes possible. The square of -1 is still an impossible number. You cannot positivize it, but the way the whole system of knowledge relates to this point of impossibility changes. Maybe the same holds for capitalism. The capitalist dynamic of perpetual self-revolutionizing relies on the endless postponing of its point of impossibility, the final crisis, the collapse. I mean, the best formula for this is when John Maynard Keynes was asked, but what about, will your politics work in the long term? He says, in the long term, we are all dead. No, and the whole point is to postpone it. What is for other earlier modes of production a dangerous exception is for capitalism normality. Crisis is in capitalism internalized, taken into account as the point of impossibility which pushes the system to continuous activity. Capitalism is structurally always in a crisis. This is why it is expanding all the time. It can only reproduce itself by way of borrowing from the future. So you see the parallel I'm making. It's still an impossibility, but it's made internal to the system, which changes the entire dynamics. And perhaps, that's my global philosophical hypothesis, one should extend this to the very definition of humanity. Maybe what ultimately distinguishes man from other animals are not some primarily, at the most radical level, some positive features, speech, tool-making, reflexive thinking, whatever, but the rise of a new point of impossibility, designated by Freud and Lacan as the impossible, real, ultimate point of reference of desire, and so on and so on. There are even very primitive experiments, I was told by some people who study animal behavior, to demonstrate this point. For example, when an ape is presented with an object beyond reach, for example, an attractive sexual partner, it tries to gain access to it, but if it doesn't work, it abandons it and moves to another object. Maybe not such a nice partner, but accessible. While humans persist, transfixed. Even if it's a failure, you indefinitely repeat a failure. And this brings me now to, let's make a step further, to a possible simple definition of what is, within the Freudian edifice, fantasy. Fantasy is an imaginary scenario which precisely tries to provide an insight into this point of impossibility. Let me explain this via a detour through Gilles Deleuze, who often varies a motive, the motive of how, in becoming post-human, we should learn to practice, quote from Deleuze, a perception of the world as it was before man. Before man released, a perception released from the human coordinates. So for Deleuze, those who fully endorse the Nietzschean return of the same should be strong enough to sustain the vision of, as Deleuze puts it, the iridescent chaos of a world before man. Now we should be very careful here. Although Deleuze resorts here openly to Kant's language, talking about the direct access to Ding an sich, to things the way they are in themselves, his point is precisely that one should subtract the opposition between phenomena, the way things appear to us, and things in themselves, from its Kantian functioning, where noumena are transcendent, inaccessible things which forever elude our grasp. What Deleuze refers to as things in themselves is, in a way, even more phenomenal than our shared phenomenal reality. It is, let's call it, an impossible phenomenon. The phenomenon that is excluded from our standard reality. The gap that separates us from noumena is thus primarily not epistemological, but practico-ethical or libidinal. There is no true reality behind or beneath phenomena. Noumena are phenomenal things which are too strong, too intensive for our perceptual apparatus attuned to constituted reality. Imagine, for example, someone being forced to witness a terrifying torture. In a way, the monstrosity of what he or she sees would make this an experience of the noumenal impossible real, which would shatter the coordinates of our common reality. In this sense, for example, if we were to discover some films shot in a concentration camp showing the systematic torture, killing, burning of prisoners, in a way we would have seen too much. We would have entered some kind of prohibited, forbidden, noumenal territory.